Chapter 8. Meg could hear it now. The great, lumbering locomotive, the rumble of many hundreds of wheels, and the screech of brakes as the engineer slowed down to take the bridge. The roar drowned out the sound of the helicopter, and it was growing louder. The vibration grew so intense that Meg was positive her teeth were jarring loose. The train hurtled out onto the steel span above them. The noise was unimaginable. The squeal of metal on metal, far louder than any jet engine. It was as if the bridge itself went into convulsions, shaking the Falconers like rag dolls in the mouth of an angry terrier. Robbed of all but the barest consciousness, Meg shut her eyes and squeezed the girder. A single thought played like a tune through her agony. Mom and Dad will never find out what happened to us. The wild vibration acted like Novocaine on her body. Numbness set in. She could not feel the girder. Her eyes blinked open, and she realized in horror that it was no longer there. She was falling. Then she was in the cool water, shocked to awareness and choking. The compulsion to swim for air was automatic. She broke the surface just in time to see a huge cannonball splash beside her. A second later, her brother bobbed up. The caboose cleared the bridge, and the noise began to fade as the train moved off. "Are you okay?" Aiden spluttered. She nodded. "The chopper?" Treading water, they both peered up from their position in the shadow of the bridge. The helicopter was gone. The crisis was over as quickly as it had come upon them. Typically, Aiden was agonizing over their close call, shivering and reliving every moment of the ordeal. Leave it to him, Meg thought, to obsess over something that didn't happen. "Aiden, we made it," she interrupted. "What's the big deal?" The big deal turned out to be this. They now had to finish their long walk to Gibbon in drenched discomfort. The day was warm and sunny, but dusk was at hand, and clouds of mosquitoes rose from the fields, looking to light on any damp surface. The t-shirts dried after an hour or so, but the pants stayed soggy, clinging, chafing. The shoes didn't dry at all, squishing and oozing with every step. The night was hideous. Aiden stumbled along the tracks, his arms windmilling as he slapped at the dozens of mosquitoes attacking his body. "Do you have to do that?" Meg muttered into the deepening darkness. "They're mosquitoes, bro, not piranhas." "That's easy for you to say. They're not eating you alive. I've got fair skin, and the water attracts them, you know." She was unmoved. "If you didn't want to get wet, you shouldn't have fallen off that bridge." "I didn't fall off," he retorted, killing 3 bugs with one slap. "I jumped off to rescue you." Meg bit her lip. Who was she crabbing at? The only person who cared what happened to her. Soon it was every bit as dark as it had been the night before. That suffocating, unbroken blackness that made them feel they were the only 2 people left in the world. At least tonight, they had the tracks to keep them on their course. Just before midnight, another train came by, this one a westbound freight. Hiding amid the wheat, Aiden noticed in the passing glow of its single headlight that both his arms were covered in raised welts. The word itch didn't do justice to the feeling. But the real enemy was not the mosquitoes, nor the chafed skin, nor aching feet. Lack of sleep was catching up with the Falconers. They had dozed only a couple of hours in the hayloft. The rest of the time, they had been not only awake, but on the run, operating at top awareness and energy. If we can't get a few hours rest, something awful's going to happen, Aiden thought numbly. But how could they stop now? Miserable as it was, darkness was the best time for them to travel out in the open like this. If we could only make it to Gibbon and stow away on a freight train, then we could get some sleep. They saw their first electric light at about 2 a.m., a bare bulb outside a barn that housed a fertilizer wholesaler. Other signs of civilization flickered ahead. "Is this the town?" Meg asked in dismay. "Probably just the outskirts," he told her. "There's supposed to be a train station around here somewhere." As they plodded on, the lights became more plentiful, and houses and low buildings appeared. At last, there it was, a small, low, shed-like structure next to a level street crossing. On the side, a single lamp lit a one-word sign: Gibbon. According to the schedule posted on the bulletin board, the first eastbound train of the day would stop here at 4:48 a.m. "It's perfect," said Aiden. "It'll still be dark, with not too many people around. We can sneak into a boxcar without anybody seeing us." "That's 2 hours from now," Meg calculated. "Let's find someplace to grab a nap in the meantime." "No naps," Aiden was adamant. "If we fall asleep now, a train wouldn't wake us unless it was running over our heads. We can't let the sun rise on us in this town. This is the first station east of Sunnydale." "Well, can we at least see if we can get into the station? I'd give anything for a real bathroom." The lock turned out to be broken, and they slipped inside with no trouble. Just enough light was coming in through the high windows for them to make out wooden benches and a small ticket and information kiosk. By feeling her way along the wall, Meg located the ladies' room. "No lights," Aiden reminded her. He sat down on a bench. No sooner was he settled onto the seat than his eyelids began to droop. He stood up quickly. "Great," he thought. "Now I can't even trust myself to relax for a minute." There was a rustling sound behind him. He sat down sharply, no longer in danger of dozing. "Stay cool," he told himself. "It's probably just a stray cat or a squirrel." Then it came again, and this time he was positive he heard a footstep. Somebody was in there. His imagination swelled with visions of muggers, murderers, and gangsters. But even if it was merely a homeless guy looking for a place to crash, that was almost as bad. He and Meg could not be seen by anybody. Avoiding sudden moves, Aiden shuffled over to the ladies' room and opened the door part way. "Hurry up," he whispered softly. "Huh?" said Meg over the sound of running water in the sink. "Let's go, Meg," he hissed. "Now!" At the sound of her approach, he grabbed her wrist and began hauling her to the exit. There was the pounding of running feet, and the Falconers ran too. Aiden was reaching for the knob when the other figure slammed into him, driving him back into his sister. The three tumbled to the floor. A split second later, the intruder leaped on top of Aiden, pinning him. Aiden felt metal, cold and sharp, pressed against his throat. A weapon. A rush of terror shot through him, and he found himself looking up through wide eyes at the face of Miguel? Eagle Dink? Meg's foot snapped out of the darkness and connected with the side of Miguel's head. The blow knocked him off Aiden and into the station door. In a lightning-fast move, he was on his feet again, brandishing a sharpened screwdriver at Meg. Aiden jumped in between them. "It's only my sister. She didn't know it was you." The dark-haired boy lowered the weapon. "Little sis packs a wallop." He squinted in the darkness from face to face. "I'm impressed, Eagle Dink. I thought a wimp like you would be back at Sunnydale, helping the Soups clean up the mess." "That shows what you know," Meg said belligerently. Miguel nodded. "I was worried. After what I said that time about the farm being a fire trap, I figured you'd be diming me as the pyro." "I know you didn't do it," Aiden muttered, tight-lipped. "Yeah? How?" Miguel's mouth dropped open. "Eagle Dink? You? I was just bluffing. You must be bugging to really try it." "It was an accident," Aiden insisted. "However it happened," Meg put in, "we're not going back there." "Amen to that," Miguel agreed fervently. "Hope this train's going to Jersey. The sooner I get to my brother's crib, the better. Where are you guys headed? Delaware, said Aiden, at the same time as Meg said, Virginia. Oh, you don't trust me, Miguel grinned, taking mock offense. Who can I tell without giving myself up? Like I care where you losers go. Hey, anybody hungry? You've got food? Meg asked anxiously. Miguel pointed to a dark shape beside the information kiosk. Candy machine. We don't have any money, said Aiden. My treat. Miguel jammed the screwdriver into the tool slot of the coin box and pried open the metal plate. Quarters cascaded onto the floor. Aiden and Meg exchanged a look. They weren't thieves. Their honesty was what separated them from people like Miguel. He read their minds. You've got a lot of integrity for arsonists, he commented, investing some of his ill-gotten gains in a Snickers. Remember, nobody's going to give you a reward for not robbing this machine. Aiden hesitated. Was he crazy to think of himself and Meg as being better than Miguel? The three of them were fugitives, wanted by the law. And they were all guilty of stealing. The civilian clothes on their backs proved that. What was to be gained by denying themselves a couple of Mars bars? He and Meg were in a desperate situation. The odds against reaching Vermont had to be astronomical. It made no sense to tip them further. Why refuse nourishment just to preserve the fine line between themselves and Miguel? It probably didn't exist anyway. Why not? He said, with a twisted smile. Meg had already scooped up a handful of coins and was stuffing them into the machine. Miguel watched in amusement. That's the spirit. It's a long way to Delaware or Virginia. Chapter 9. The 448 pulled into Gibbon Station a few minutes early. Truck farmers were spread along the road, their bushel baskets ready for loading onto the boxcars. The train crew was in position to open up cars 5 and 6 in the powerful spotlights of the work area. To anyone inside that brighter-than-day zone, this train had no engine nor any caboose. The lights were blinding, the night around them inky black. Far behind the loading area, nearly a quarter-mile to the rear, 3 shadowy figures slipped out of the underbrush and stole over to car 41, the third last on the long freight. A hand reached up, released the latch, and slid the heavy metal door slightly open. An athletic silhouette hoisted itself up and inside, then bent down to assist 2 companions. When the corrugated metal was pulled shut again, it left no sign that anyone had ever been there. The interior was pitch black, darker even than the Nebraska night, and soundless, except for the ragged breathing of the 3 runaways. Suddenly, a match blazed, illuminating all 3 of their faces. Miguel shone this temporary light into the 4 corners of the car. It was empty, except for a few tattered sheets of newsprint and a single large crate pushed up against the front wall. Looks like we got the presidential suite, he said cheerfully. Let's just hope we don't get fleas, was Meg's comment. Let's just hope we don't get caught, Aiden amended. What's in that big box? Miguel lit another match and went over to investigate. Hey, Eagle Dink, what does TNT spell? Put out that match, rasped Aiden in a panic. Miguel nearly choked on his laughter. You are such a sucker. It's just some old tarps. Our beds, dummy. Beside him, Aiden heard Meg snicker. There was an abrupt lurch and a screech from the steel wheels. The train began to creep forward. Miguel shared out the tarpaulins. They were rough and stiff and smelled strongly of cabbages. To the fugitives, they were the softest of perfumed feather beds. All 3 were asleep before the train had gathered full speed. Aiden, time to get your shoes on. 6-year-old Aiden Falconer sat cross-legged on the shag carpeting of his small bedroom in the summer house. Spread out on the floor in front of him were a dozen colored photographs, the boys' pride and joy. He had taken them himself, using his own camera and his very first roll of film. "Come on, Aiden. We have to be at the Colchester Grill at 6. "I'm busy," he called down the stairs. He hated restaurants where you had to sit in your chair the whole time, waiting forever for people to bring food you weren't going to like anyway. They never had hamburgers. And pretty soon, Meg would be crying. "Uncle Frank and Aunt Jane will wonder what happened to us." "I'm not going." He selected a single picture out of his array. Uncle Frank and Aunt Jane. They were nice enough, he supposed, but so boring. Whenever they were around, all Mom and Dad wanted to do was talk, and eat dinner for 3 hours. He prepared to rip the snapshot into a billion pieces, but he could hear his mother's footsteps starting up the stairs. Quickly, he collected his pictures, stuffed them into the cigar box that held his summer treasures, and stashed that in his secret hiding place. He got the loose piece of panel back in its slot, just as his mother burst into the room. "What is the matter with you, Aiden? We are going out to dinner, and that's that." She reached down and hoisted him high in the air. As he swung around past the window, he saw the gleaming waters of Lake Champlain on a summer afternoon. The dock was festooned with hundreds of colored flags. At the near end, the ferry was boarding for its trip to the New York side of the lake. "Come on, sweetie," his mother coaxed. "You'll have fun." As she held him, he had a strange feeling that he should be hugging her harder, never letting go. Aiden awoke sucking air, because someone had taken his mother away, and she was never coming back. "Hey, Eagle Dink!" Miguel was shaking him. Aiden sat up in the darkness of the boxcar. The dream was still very real in his mind. Colchester. The house was in Colchester, Vermont. Miguel brayed a derisive laugh. "You were crying for Mommy. You've got some serious hang-ups about your folks. What gives?" Aiden looked around, orienting himself. A thin line of light showed at the edge of the sliding door. Daylight. He checked his watch. 4:05. "We've been asleep for 11 hours. "Meg?" "Still snoozing," said Miguel. "No, I'm not," came her drowsy voice. "Where are we?" "Stopped," Aiden said. It was only then that he realized it himself. The train was standing still. He turned to Miguel. "How long have we been stopped?" "Don't know. I've been sleeping like you." They could hear voices outside. Aiden listened. Strident voices, barking orders. The rumble and slam of boxcar doors kept repeating itself, and was that a siren? "Something's up," Meg said nervously. Miguel slid the door open a few inches and flattened himself so he could peer up the length of the train. "Cops," he said. Aiden was horrified. "Searching the train?" "No, dancing the hula. Get a grip." "You get a grip," Aiden hissed angrily. "This is your fault. They probably saw the busted candy machine in Gibbon and knew we were on this freight." "Can we run for it?" Meg interrupted. Miguel shook his head. "They're too close. We're trapped." Chapter 10. Trapped in a boxcar. Something frantic rattled around in Aiden's head. He should know about this. This was familiar. That's crazy. You've never been on a train that wasn't a commuter. What do you know about escaping from a freight car? Then he remembered. Mac Mulvey, Dad's recurring detective hero, had once broken out of a locked freezer car via... He looked up, and there it was. The shaft of light from the open slider shone on an emergency hatch in the ceiling. He rushed over to the wooden crate and began positioning it in the center of the car. "What are you going to do, Eagle Dink?" scoffed Miguel. "Mail yourself out of here?" Aiden pointed straight up. Instantly, he had 2 helpers. When the crate was in place, he scrambled up the wooden side and balanced on the narrow rim. The trapdoor was held in place by a small latch. He popped the hatch, reached up, and took hold of the roof of the car. Here goes, he thought. If the police were watching the top of the train, this would be his last act as a free person. 1, 2, a silent prayer. 3. He heaved himself up through the opening and flopped flat onto the metal surface. He could see tall buildings in the distance, a skyline. They were outside a big city, but their immediate surroundings were lower and leafier. This was a suburban station. To his left, about a dozen cops patrolled the platform, searching the train. And they were only 2 cars away. Hurry, he hissed, reaching down to help Meg and then Miguel to the roof of the boxcar. He looked around desperately. To his right was an empty track. There weren't any officers on that side, but it was a 12-foot drop to the ground. A broken ankle, not a good idea for a fugitive. Follow me, he whispered. Keeping low, he slithered forward on the metal roof, scrambling over the 4-foot gap to the next car. Over his shoulder, he could see Miguel and Meg following him. The 3 snaked silently ahead, barely daring to breathe. Soon, Aiden found himself on a different kind of surface, a thick lattice cage. The powerful farm odor reached him almost immediately. A livestock carrier, animals lowing wafted up from below. He peered down through the bars. Didn't it figure? Cows. He slunk to the edge of the car and eased over the side. Using the steel struts as ladder rungs, he began to climb down. The cows mooed at him. One even pressed its snout right up to the opening and licked him, but he was able to clamber low enough to jump to the ground. Miguel landed beside him a few seconds later. Meg came last. As her sneakers made contact with the gravel, she lost her footing and lurched toward the open track. Miguel grabbed her arm and propped her back into balance. He gestured meaningfully at the spot where she had almost fallen. This was a commuter line. It had an electrified third rail. Had Meg touched it, she would have been seriously injured or even killed. Her mouth formed the word thanks, but she allowed no sound to come out. Hidden behind the bulk of the train, they scampered the length of the station. A small metal ladder provided access to the outbound platform. They scrambled up, trying to look like local kids and not fleeing felons. They were in luck. The vacant side was nearly deserted. At this time of day, people returning from a day's work in the city just wanted to get home. No one was hanging around. They strode purposely toward the stairway to the parking lot. It was 100 yards away. A single football field. For the first time, Aiden allowed the notion to enter his mind that they might survive this latest close call. They were halfway there, the 50-yard line, when the bathroom door opened and out stepped a pudgy, middle-aged policeman. It was too late to turn, too late to hide. The only plan of action was to keep walking. As they drew close, Aiden noticed the fax in the officer's hand. The page was dotted with photographs, murky mugshots of the Sunnydale runaways. Strangely, amazingly, the cop let them pass. They forged on, eyes fixed straight ahead. Was it possible that he simply hadn't noticed them? Leather soles scraping against concrete. The sound of someone turning around. Then, "Hey! Hey!" They ran, flying across the platform and down the stairs. The cop gave chase. "Police! Hey! Stop!" In addition to being tougher than the Falconers, Miguel turned out to be faster as well. He blasted through the parking lot, opening a gap between himself and Aiden and Meg. He'll get away and we won't. The thought brought Aiden hidden reserves of power, and he turned on the jets and kept pace. Meg was hot on his heels. Luckily, the policeman wasn't much of an athlete. They could hear him puffing into his walkie-talkie. "Lewin to Caldwell! Chris, I've got him! Fast little rats!" The parking lot was bordered by a small strip of stores and restaurants. Beyond that, subdivisions began. Miguel never hesitated. He barreled headlong down tree-lined roads, wheeling left and right, navigating as if he'd lived here all his life. The Falconers followed like the tail of a comet. They had no loyalty for Miguel Reyes. They didn't like him and trusted him zero. But he ran with a kind of cool self-assurance that inspired confidence. Besides, if anybody was an expert at fleeing the police, it had to be this juvenile delinquent. For good or ill, their fates had become intertwined. Aiden looked over his shoulder. He could no longer see Officer Lewin. It brought some relief, but reinforcements couldn't be far behind. Miguel sensed that, for the moment, the coast was clear. He selected one of the scores of identical homes and dashed for it, hopping the fence with an effortless vault. Aiden was practically babbling as he scrambled over the obstacle. "What are you doing? There's nowhere to hide here." Miguel indicated the house, a well-tended brick colonial surrounded by sculpted bushes. "What do you call that?" Meg jumped down beside them. "A house full of people," she panted, "with a telephone for calling the police." "For a couple of eagles, you guys are blind as bats. There's a pile of newspapers on the front stoop. They're on vacation, brainiacs. Nobody home. No alarm either." "How do you know?" puffed Aiden. "No stickers in the windows. Alarm people love stickers." He pulled a grapefruit-sized stone out of the garden and headed for the patio doors. The Falconers exchanged uneasy glances. Taking clothes from a drying rack or bikes that you planned to return was one thing. This was breaking and entering. "But pretty soon the whole neighborhood will be crawling with cops." "Amazing," Aiden marveled. The only way to survive as a fugitive was by breaking even more laws. If the police really want to reduce crime, they should leave us alone. Miguel hefted the rock and deftly punched out a single pane of glass from the French doors. He reached inside and flipped the latch. They were in.